Rolling here. Camera's rolling there. So. All right. So first order of business, minutes of March 19th. Any additions, deletions, corrections? Seems so long ago. Hearing none, we'll consider them approved. New business.
Okay, we have a request from Roxbury Ambulance to begin the BLS Narcan program. It's signed by their medical director as well as their chief operating officer. So I present it to the REMAC for their approval.
So this is another BLS Narcan program that's being initiated.
Correct.
Seems like a good idea. Any voices here to address that particular issue? All right, all those in favor? Aye. Let me go a little bit out of order, Phil, and nominate Dr. Deb Funk to replace Dr. Dave Fannion as the Coble School Regional Hospital representative to the REMAC and also the ED director at Coble School. So put that as a nomination now for approval.
Okay, very good. The REMAC votes on the nomination and then we'll confirm it this afternoon.
Okay, all right. So activity, she can't vote until after full approval.
That's way up, but well, you know.
Maybe. Let's see which way she
We're
goes.
one big happy family.
Depends on if she votes yea or nay.
Okay, so that's a motion to recommend to the council that Dr. Funk be recognized as representative.
Noted, I already have it listed under council business for this afternoon.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll do it here as well.
Okay.
Any discussion about that? All those in favor? REMAC wise? Aye. Thanks. Marydale requests approval for a new agency medical director.
They're requesting that Dr. Kelly Robinson be approved as their new agency medical director. They filled out the necessary paperwork and Dr. Robinson has co-signed it.
What kind of doctor is Dr. Robinson?
I'm sorry?
What kind of physician is that?
Yeah, he's an emergency physician, boarded, and ED director at Fox. Any further discussion about that? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you.
Just a note for the record, in case some folks here are wondering how come the vote is so quiet. State regulations are that on the REMACs, only the physicians have a vote. All the other members of the REMAC are consultative. The physicians alone have a vote. That's why the vote is so quiet, because there's only a few of the.
All right, so doctors, please speak up.
They're always so quiet. Anyway. Yeah.
Oh, we'll just wait. Okay, so the next one is billed as a reminder.
Yeah, I was requested by several parties
good.
to, and I sent an email out about this at the time that I received the request, that to remind the EPCR folks in the region, and indeed this is a statewide issue also, that there must be a transfer of patient care information upon arrival at the destination facility. Even though the agency is using EPCRs, they still have to transfer certain basic items, data items about the patient care that took place during their custody of the patient. So just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, I think it's a really important point. The electronic interface between EPCR and hospitals is not really developed. It'd be nice if it was, if you could directly shoot the EPCR into the electronic medical record. So we have fixes like, it's on our server. But so the kinds of responses we hear from agencies sometimes vary from, well, it's on our server. You can go get it. Which really doesn't help in the heat of the moment. And I'm worried that the hospitals are under state regulation to acquire those PCRs and include it in their database. It's actually a data field in Sparks data. So they need the PCR number, and the hospital should be recording the PCR number and at least scanning and saving the PCR if it's paper or transmitting it. So, and I think that with all the number of vendors of ePCR, I'm not even sure, you know, the interfaces for all these different models of ePCR are going to be readily interfaced with a hospital printer to print them all off at the time. But there's no, you know, there's really no substitute for actually trying to communicate with the provider. It's hard on both ends because you guys show up. There may be no bed to put your patient into, so you're hanging out. You hopefully have a nurse or somebody greeting you. Ideally, the provider would be greeting you, but a lot of times that can't happen. So I think it's really critical if there's something you want us to know, we basically want to know any meds that were given or any things that the patient said. It's really an important part of the history. So without it, your history is just sitting out in the cyber world, and it's outside the brain of the physician who's seeing this patient. The patients don't really know what all's going on. So just case in point, I saw a patient with, I was all set to send her home, and then right before discharge, she described the squad asking her to bear down. Really? That was news. So then I went looking for the PCR. We didn't have one. So then we got it. Oh, she was in rapid new onset atrial fibrillation, or flutter, fib flutter. And she had completely resolved by the time she got to the ED. So it was really important. You made a diagnosis, basically. So sometimes you're making diagnoses, and we really need to import that into the total body of evidence that we have before we discharge a patient, or make a disposition. So I can't emphasize how important your information is, and how a lot of times what you see and what the patient says, you know how the story changes, right? So, so you see a patient, a bunch of things are done. She doesn't repeat necessarily that same complaint by the time she gets to the ED. But they may remember that they told the squad I was short of breath. But if it comes across as I can't swallow, well, okay, that's a little bit different. So I just want to emphasize and underscore the importance of the handoff to the EDs. We really value and need that information. A lot of times you're doing important both diagnostic steps and therapeutic steps. You know. So if she got nitro and she got this and she got that, we need to know that. So I'd like to open it up for discussion because I find it as more squads go to ePCR, it becomes more of an issue.
Gus, it's not this problem isn't limited to just ePCRs. They're finding across the board, and where this complaint was initially raised was at the stack, that there's no data information being transferred, and especially as patients transferred from one facility to the next, they're getting the hospital data, but they want the scene information. It's both with electronic and handwritten PCRs. The information's not being handed off. Several hospitals have come to us because when they go through their JCO accreditation, they don't have enough PCRs in their charts, so they're getting dinged on it. It's across the board, so it's not limited to just ePCRs, and I don't want anyone to think, well, this just applies to ePCRs.
Any solutions that you state is coming to grips with? How many different sort of substantial ePCR vendors are there active in the state?
There's quite a bit.
Yeah,
I couldn't tell you, as a state, we can't officially endorse any one. They're supposed to all go through the bridge or the
You can't
registry.
now because the horse is out the barn. We could have maybe at the beginning, but
There's just way too many there.
Yeah.
I mean, the most common one used is EMS charts still.
right. So it's really.
There's
it's a
probably
good
3 or
thought.
4 main ones: charts, Zoll, and there's a third one that they use a lot.
IPCR.
Image, huh?
What's Pete Berry's EPCR?
ePCR.
That's a nice one.
You know, one of the things we could try, And I
But
just-
a lot of providers say that they'll leave the PCR in the ER with the clerk, the secretary,
Yeah.
whoever, and they never end up in the chart.
Right.
So it becomes a catch-22. Is it a hospital program? Is it a provider? Is it a hospital problem? A provider problem? It's hard to say.
So it's a problem, I agree. Maybe we should just standardize something. You know, like what if the hospital's EDs had an in-basket for PCRs, a place to put them?
Deb, you want to speak to how well that worked at Albany Med?
It doesn't work at all. You know, a lot of times too, they'll leave and fill it out back at the station and then send it, which is useless. Although I will say they're pretty good about speaking to the provider before they leave, which is better than a PCR.
But then
Right.
there's a shift change, and the information doesn't get recorded or passed on, and then the next person who's actually making decisions for the patient never heard any of it. So, I mean, it's that we both, hospitals and EMS have some ownership, and we all have to work together, I think, to make it better.
Right.
And there's no, I mean, a lot of times the provider is not available, right? You'd like, that, I agree, that would be ideal, like a verbal with a written, right? So
There needs to be a handoff PCR. Oneon has got a pretty good system. They've got a handoff.
It's like a synopsis of the visit.
Exactly. And then they go back and they complete it, but that handoff is within the completed PCR that they fax in. And it says draft right across the handoff.
Yeah.
Is there a way to get a copy of that and have it maybe emailed out to all of us so that we can see what
These are
we
other
are using?
examples of the same.
This is one we're using.
How mobile life be about?
Can you get one to
We'll have
fill?
a short form also.
I can't, I'll check with Oneon.
Yeah, that'd
See
be
what,
great.
because it's built into their server, their system.
I think that makes
We've started
sense.
this week using everything.
Vassar had a system where the doctor, anytime there was a medication, had to sign the PCR, even though it wasn't required due to protocols and whatnot, just acknowledging that you are aware that patient X was given XYZ meds.
But if there's no PCR,
Well, but on the electric PCRs, there's still a portion where the doctor can sign under medical control. At least there's some documentation that there was communication.
I like
It's a
that.
suggestion.
Yeah.
It's a good stuff, tail stuff. So in the last 1 minute, I received 5 examples of synoptic versions of the PCR. So Rural Metro has one, Midstate EMS has one, Oneonta has one. Who else? Flight Program has one. I was thinking of designing one for it. The ED was going to hand you a sheet and say, here, fill this out. But I think, so it's a substitute, right? It seems weird that we're doing a substitute for a form that's actually supposed to capture this. What's the advantage within Rural Metro of like this information exchange version as opposed to the PCR?
We're doing ePCR, ours are sent by fax when it's completed, so a lot of times the crews leave, headed back, because we have pretty long transport distances a lot of times, so the crews will get back and head back, complete it, and then it'll be faxed in.
So the full version is you have to
Full
come
version.
and
so
this
is this
is
supposed to be done on every patient?
Every patient that comes into the ER.
So as it turns out, this is the first time I've ever seen this.
It started this week.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
So you'll see it at your next shift.
And we're posting your schedule at the station.
That's me.
so there's like at least 5 versions of the Cliff Notes version of the PCR. How do you think we should go about synthesizing this? One approach would be for the region to synthesize something and say, okay, this is the AAREMS version that we all have to complete.
Remo has one.
Remo does?
Yeah.
So that's one of the 5.
But it's a suggestion, it's if you don't have one on your own, use that.
It's a minimum documentation
Right.
standard.
Uh-huh. So you either do one of the above,
Mhm.
like leave your PCR.
Leave your
or-
PCR, do something that has all this information on it, or use this form.
Right.
Howard, could you send me a copy of that remote document?
Working on it. I just
Oh,
emailed him.
okay. Silly me not to think so. That would be very helpful, and I'll send that out to the EPCR agencies as a suggested item, unless you'd like to mandate something, Gus.
I think we should pause long enough to like take a look at what's available, look at the physicians to see what's available.
Okay.
Maybe we could scan all the examples and just have people sort of look at the elements of them and say, okay, what would be the the gold standard for any form going forward. And then in the end, we'll probably adopt REMAC.
So, I think you have to have the hospitals have to be on board with this as well. So we went through this exact process. You know, we were the first EPCR agency in this region, and we met with St. Mary's where 90% of our patients went. And we kicked around, we used to hand them sheets of paper, and sometimes, you know, no different than probably those forms. Sometimes they got passed on, sometimes they didn't. Obviously, with technology the way it is, the hospital, through several different meetings, decided not to do that paper portion. So they actually, they have, all of their documentation is electronic. They actually built a screen for EMS in their own charting. So when we come in, we give a verbal report, we get with that nurse, that patient's nurse, and all of that EMS information, vitals, meds, times, all of that stuff is passed on, treatments, and all of it is documented right in that screen when we turn that patient over. So it's automatically with that chart. So that was their preferred method as opposed to paper. So I think that all of the hospitals
that's
have to
ideal, but it sounds, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like one PCR vendor with one hospital's EMR system.
It's not, it has nothing to do with our vendor. This is a verbal report we actually give to the nurse. The hospital did not. The hospital did not want to get away from having an actual verbal report.
I mean, yeah, but there has to be a nurse on a computer. That's great when there's a nurse free to be on a computer and give the report, but you know, in a situation where it's busy and the nurse is, you know, doing 14 things while she's listening or he's listening to you, it's not going to get in there.
We don't have that issue at St. Mary's. We always have, you know, we always have that nurse that's taking that report. The nurse actually signs our EPCR that they've accepted the patient and received that report. And then our policy as an agency is the crew has that PCR completed, it comes back, it goes to the, and our goal is 1 hour from the time of call to the time that PCR gets sent to the ER.
I can tell you on the hospital side of it, at Delaware Valley Hospital, we only have one agency right now using EPCRs. And after they give report, the nurse or the PA, one of the two of them, is signing it off. Same way with the regular PCRs is we finding out a program where the nurse or the PA signs off the report. After they take the report from the patient, they sign the PCR.
Nurses do.
The nurse or the PA, either one.
I think some kind of like fail-safe mechanism, like a signature on many meds given or something like that, is not a bad idea.
Basically, on a basic New York State written PCR, it's required that somebody from the hospital sign off and accept that patient.
Hospital rep, it doesn't have to be a physician.
Doesn't have to be a physician, but it should be the PA or the nurse, whoever's accepting the patient.
We have
I don't
a
think the
policy.
clerk should sign it off. But.
Right, we have a policy that it's got to be a minimum of an RN. So RN, PA, physician, but no, the unit clerk cannot sign for a patient.
They're not signing the electronic,
LPN
do they sign electronic PCR?
They do, they sign right on our screen.
Sign right on the screen.
So,
But then does the hospital get a copy of that?
You do.
Like right then and there?
They electronically transmit it within an hour usually.
Oh, within an hour, that won't work, I don't think. We're looking for real time.
right, so the hospital always gets a report, some kind of verbal report. And so that we have to, as the institutions, we have to take some responsibility to put that in writing. And that's great. You make sure you give us a report, we, you know, write it down somewhere, we sign to prove to everybody that you gave us a report, but that still doesn't solve the problem of the fact that we don't have the PCRs. And it's a problem on both sides probably. You know, when JCO comes through and says we want to see your PCRs, or when we have to submit data to the stack and we don't have the PCRs because it got sent somewhere that got lost, either, you know, somewhere in between or didn't make it to the patient chart, then it's an issue. So I think it's two separate problems.
Yeah.
It's making sure that a report is given and received and stays with the patient, and then there's the issue of getting the actual PCR to the patient record reliably, and that's probably mostly on the hospital side for sure.
I can tell you, a few years ago when Susquehanna region first started with the EPCRs, and when they did it, it was a REMAC policy. It was across the board. Every agency had to go with the EPCR. There was no, well, I'm not going to do it, I'm not going to do it. That's what they did. And but there was only, what, 4 or 5 hospitals that were participating in it that their agencies ran to. And so what the REMAC did, what the regional council did, is they took and put it, this is when they used to download them right there in the hospital. They put a loading station right in each hospital. And when they finished with their EPCR, they download it right there so the hospital had a copy of it. But it's pretty expensive to do that.
And it's vendor specific.
Yeah.
So we can't have like 8 stations for
Right.
different PCRs. So I think what it sounds like is we need a physical scrap of something that describes the thing. Could be the actual PCR, it could be, the modified version of that.
Unless a facility like St. Mary's, if St. Mary's doesn't want your paper, unless a facility specifically says they don't want that.
Yeah, I
they
think our
won't,
process
right?
works very
Yeah.
well. I'd hate to go back to paper and,
Right.
Well, you're creating the equivalent of that. Your nurse is creating the equivalent of that form, it sounds like. And what about signatures? Is that, if there's a paper PCR, should we require physician signatures on any med-related PCRs?
Well, what if you transport to a facility that doesn't have a physician
Or a PA?
or a PA?
They're going to have one of those two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that would be, again, specific. I mean, for us to track down a physician for a med that was given on a standing order and a protocol, albuterol and Atrovent, that, for us to track down that physician and take his time away from patients, I think would be an issue. And that's why our policy is an RN or above.
All right, well, it sounds like we need to synthesize all this information and come back with a regional policy and procedure for this.
How about I collect samples of some documents that are currently in use and send them to the REMAC members, and the docs can get back to me and see which one they like. How's that?
That covers that aspect of it. I think all the issues need to be sort of considered, and that's fine. Does anybody want to volunteer to sort of spearhead a TAG, technical advisory group, or a task force, or a work group, or?
I'm not officially a member of the committee yet.
See?
All that means, Deb, is that you can't vote no about it.
The rest of them can vote yes.
So wait, you can't say no?
I have to at least get through 1 month for that. I think, let's do it a collective, Phil, and see what we come up with. Maybe we can just do it online.
Okay.
Yeah, so scan, and so we'll get the REMO version, the rural metro version, mid-state EMS version. Are there other versions out there?
Every region has one.
Everybody has something probably.
Mary, did you say that state EMS has a version of this?
We don't.
You don't, okay.
All right, so next time.
All right.
All right, so for some reason we're reviewing a mid-state regional protocol for patient restraint. Why are we
Yeah,
reviewing mid-state?
we were asked to look at the Mid-State Regional EMS Council's patient restraint protocol. It's a new protocol that Dr. Traglia put together. On April 17th, we got a copy, but I sent copies of this to all the REMAC members. What it does is it allows Haldol and Versed on standing order for critical care and paramedics instead of as a physician option in case of excited delirium and the necessity of patient restraint.
Phil, I can elaborate on this.
Okay.
Last month in the Syracuse region, specifically at their homeless shelters, and there was a few cases at Lemoyne, actually rural metro bore the brunt of this. The marijuana wax made a huge appearance out there. So they needed to change, they did an emergent protocol change, upping the amount. I believe the REMO or the collaborative protocols call for 5 as an option, and this has 10 in the protocol.
10 of
Versed. I am Versed. These patients out there were taking 6 to 12 cops to literally hold them down just so they could give them something. It was much akin to the bath salts, the behaviors. And then they would all of a sudden either grade down, or they would be fine, wake up 24 hours a day and have no occurrence of this happening. So what they were looking at, and it came up at the REMO meeting, is they wanted to look at the possibility of maybe having the same protocol across the board.
region. So it came up at the collaborative protocol REMAC?
He was gonna send it out through the collaborative protocol, I believe. It came up at the REMO meeting earlier this month.
Yeah, I think we're gonna, sounds like a reasonable idea. We're gonna try to stay in sync with our
Yeah,
brethren.
Mid-State is not in the collaborative protocols, which is the interesting
Right.
piece of it.
No, I know. Well, this, maybe they're getting closer.
And Mid-State
but-
actually stole this from New York City.
Right.
Is there any published data on use of these doses in patients in this situation and the incidence of adverse effect or anything? I mean, I don't think 10 milligrams of Versed is going to hurt anybody, but if we're going to make changes or consider changes, we should do it with some sort of evidence base, right?
I understand. There's a recording here. I
Dr.
can't.
Funk, just as testifying as a victim of Camp Bisco.
I'm sorry,
years
but
ago.
you asked me.
Yeah, I don't know, how many cases did we have, 130?
137.
137 cases of similar type overdoses. Our standard administration became 10 of Versed and 5 of Haldol automatically. And every single one of those cases was a positive outcome. There was no failure whatsoever. There was not even a need for intubation related to that administration. I mean, there was a couple of intubations out there, but completely separate from. So, you know, I mean, 130, 140 test cases at Camp Bisco, and they were all very positive.
You should put it together and publish it.
It's a pretty big sample size.
I'm going to put that on my list of...
Yeah.
By Friday.
Get that out of your mouth.
Well, it sounds reasonable. I think we're going to try to stay in sync with collaborative protocol, so we can move together with them.
So are they're suggesting giving Haldol with the Versed?
Yeah, it calls for both.
Usually just 10 of Versed IM works pretty well.
I wouldn't be surprised if you see this change again after the Western New York protocols were approved at CMAC. In SEMSCO the other day, they actually added ketamine now to the excited delirium protocol. So
On standing order?
it is going to be on standing. Well, it is on standing order yet.
No.
There are talks about making it on standing order. There are talks about they're working with B&E to make it a standing order for RSI-MFI and for excited delirium.
One individual is working with B&E on his own to try to make this happen.
So
It's already a physician option to have ketamine.
Tell you what, I'm not going to hold my breath.
All right, well, it sounds like a good, necessary adjustment to the formulary. Does it require a formulary adjustment? Do we have enough MDAS for these patients?
We should have 10.
There's 20 milligrams.
There's 20.
There should be 20 milligrams in each bottle.
And that's a minimum, so.
All right.
And this question came up at the other meeting. If you're just if you're increasing the amount that you carry, you just need to let us know that in your substocks on the ambulance. But as far as change, otherwise there's no notification necessary to us.
All right. So I think we will, sound like a good idea. We will try not to make unilateral, semi-regional protocol changes to a document that's meant to be broadly regional. So the collaborative protocols now go from Rochester to Albany and down to Westchester.
Excluding Syracuse, the mid-state region.
Jump over.
Correct, there's 3 regions.
Yeah.
Oh, the
CNY.
format looks very similar.
Yeah, they're getting close.
CNY and mid-standard together.
North Country, CNY.
North Country went with Central.
Right.
North Country, CNY.
Yeah, it's North Country, CNY, and
I wonder how
mid-state.
different they are.
Huh?
I wonder how different they are.
Yeah.
There's fine nuances. And that was one of the arguments, because when they redid them the last time, they were made to look so similar to the others that they're afraid of providers.
They're going to mix them up.
Yes.
Shame.
All right, any other business for the REMAC?
Yes, I have, Joyce regrets that she's not able to be here in person today, but I have from her a request for a short review of BLS CPAP training materials and protocols by the REMAC docs. There is she makes a couple of notes. She's putting together a BLS CPAP program for review by the REMAC docs. As a matter of fact, I sent copies of it out yesterday to everybody, by all REMAC members, including physicians, of course, by email. The sample, these are her notes that she asked me to read briefly to you. The sample Finger Lakes protocol does not agree with the sample training program in the Finger Lakes package. The protocol says use it only for COPD and pulmonary edema. The training program says use it for COPD, asthma, pulmonary edema, drowning, pneumonia, and CO poisoning. There's supposed to be a sample state protocol coming out in the near future, within a couple of weeks. This is as per Dan Clayton at DOH. He advised me that there's one coming out. But the DOH policy statement on CPAP for BLS agencies dated April 29th of this year notes that EMS agencies wishing to be authorized to use CPAP devices must make a written request to the REMAC, and there should be written policies and procedures developed for the use of CPAP that are consistent with regional policies and protocols. So we have to wait for the state protocol to come out before we can deal with anything along that nature. But she wondered if the REMAC docs would like BLS CPAP use to be reported on a standard form to us, to the REMAC. And do we want a standard application form from an agency, which of course would include the agency medical director's signature as well as the chief operating officer, to begin the CPAP, the BLS CPAP program. So those are just a couple of questions she asked, and she, as soon as we get something further from DOH on the protocol, we will pass it on, obviously, and it can be handled by email. But these are the couple of questions that she had about the BLS CPAP program. She didn't expect, solid answers this morning, obviously, but she just wanted everybody to be aware of the work in progress and some questions that should be answered.
So CPAP now for BLS is a demonstration project kind of status?
I think the demo project is over now. The demo project is over, and now it's...
So it is approved?
It is approved, and I believe the commissioner signed off on it already. The
Yeah,
protocols
I think
and
I
everything is
emailed
coming
it to
out
someone.
supposedly this week.
This week, good.
So all the materials...
Yes, as of April 29th, this policy statement was issued by DOH.
All we need really is the educational part for it to go into effect.
And that will come from
And
the
then-
state, presumably, as part of BLS, right?
Well, I think Joyce is working on an educational component.
That's the holdup. The curriculum and protocol is going to be released, I believe, this week they announced. So there is going to be a curriculum, an actual teaching curriculum.
Okay.
With any BLS change, it needs to go through some form of curriculum through the state, because the new classes have to teach it. So there is a curriculum coming out already for it.
Okay.
We also need to be ready in the protocols, because in adult airway management to the EMT, there's nothing in our protocol for it. Adult respiratory, there's nothing mentioned in our protocols for acute asthma, acute pulmonary edema, or COPD exacerbation for BLS. So our protocols need to be also updated to match what the state's got out there for us.
All right. So sounds like it's just around the corner. Any other business, Phil?
Nothing outside of executive session.
So you are requesting an executive session?
We're going to, I'm making that request. If we have a room next door ready for us, in fact.
Well, we probably should talk about that email that you sent me about a complaint that went to, so someone had a complaint about something that happened at St. Mary's, and Nathan Latour never spoke with the medical directors at either hospital nor us, but instead decided to go to...
Okay, that was from, where is Chuck
Here.
Caruso? Yeah. Chuck Caruso from JVAC is here, and he's the one who sent me the information which I passed on to the docs. So he can address it, I'm sure.
Yeah, because it really doesn't do any good to bring it to another region to talk to it. I went to the hospital, I have no idea who the patient was. I'm sure St. Mary's has no idea. We went back, tried to figure out, well, we can't get anyone to say that happened, so we can't really address it. So the proper way to do something is to go to the medical director of the emergency department that you bring the patient to. If you have a complaint, and bring it to him or the nurse manager, and let them handle the problem, and then we can maybe solve it. If it was a problem, I didn't even know that it was a problem. I can't figure out what happened. I'm sure St. Mary's is going to have the same exact response.
I think I've just noticed every time I bring a patient, and I don't use CPAP a lot, but the nurses will take the CPAP off without talking to a doctor. And then the patient starts to decompensate. That's happened at both hospitals.
Okay, so let's get...
Specific cases have to come directly to us.
Let's get back. It doesn't do any good to bring it to another region, to bring it anywhere except for to the hospital itself. Talk to the director, or talk to the nurse manager.
Because
we'll
this
figure
region
it out and address
doesn't,
it.
this council doesn't have any oversight over nursing practice within the ED.
No.
So to bring it here doesn't do any good. We've got to bring it right back to us so that we can talk to those nurses. Because this council can't go back to that nurse and say, you should have practiced this way, or not this way.
Yeah, just think of it symmetrically with, an agency medical director, right? So if we had an issue with something that happened with a particular agency, the proper channel would be to go talk to that medical director. The same is true of hospitals. So if you have a hospital issue, take it to the ED directly. All right, thanks,
Meg,
Bill.
I had another question.
Okay.
There was a concern about IO insertion in ROSC at the AEMT level. It's authorized, but when you look through the rest of the protocols, the AEMT cannot do it anywhere else, as far as like a cardiac arrest, full arrest. So the idea is, why don't we be able to allow the AEMT to use an IO during the full arrest or cardiac arrest, not just the ROSC? So we need to look at the protocols in that component also.
Is it restrictive, though? Does it say, it's just that it's not listed as an option?
It's not listed as an option for them.
If it's restricted, Dave, that's just a mistake.
Yeah, we need to address that as a...
It's confusing the students and everybody, now they're gonna have them practicing. It's very confusing for them. They've learned the skill, but they can only do it in ROSC. They can't do it anywhere.
Right.
It's not even in the...
But you're not teaching to a regional protocol, right?
You're not teaching to a regional protocol, but I'm going to turn them out to practice in this region.
Right.
So I can't turn them out and confuse them.
Agreed.
More clarification needed. All right, any other business for the REMAC?
Only the executive session.
Okay, so we'll break. Come back. What?
Dr. Daly was approved to do a BLS epinephrine administration project last week at SEMSCO. I think Dr. Markowitz has been involved in that. He can probably speak to it better than I can.
If it comes about, we're paying about $1,000 to $1,500 every 18 months to replace our EpiPens. The plan is that Rochester Pharmacy is going to put together kits, and in the kits you'd have 2 syringes for adult, marked for adult, 2 syringes marked for peds, and then epinephrine instructions, and hopefully a complete training program that goes along with this on how to draw it up at a BLS level and inject it at a BLS level with clearly marked syringes and a clearly marked protocol, and use it as a pilot program to see, is BLS level able to drop and inject epinephrine. So there's a formal program coming down, and hopefully should be offered or entered pretty soon. And the goal was to try to get as many of us involved as we can to prove that this is a viable alternative to EpiPens.
It requires REMAC and regional council approval for services to participate. That's
yes.
It's going to be a statewide thing, or is it
State, every agency in the state. There are some changes in the state council report that I provided. I have also provided you the slide documentation that Dr. Daly had shown at the CMAC meeting. There are some changes. They have pretty much made this foolproof, but it is going to be a very controlled study. Everything is going through the University of Rochester. The kits are going to be labeled after every BLS administration of this, or every time you use this kit. You have to phone into a physician. There's 4 physicians that are taking the call. The number is going to be clearly printed on that. You're going to give the kit number in the synopsis behind the call. They're going to document it. They are actually having 50,000 syringes made. So each kit will have a syringe. They're taking the milliliter markings off of it, and it's going to have 2 lines on it, one marked P, one marked A. So for a pediatric, you drop to this line. For an adult, you drop to another line. It's really a foolproof.
It's also a workaround. So does the EpiPen guys, they have a monopoly on that patent? Is that why we're doing this?
There's $10 million, it's estimated that $10 million worth of expired EpiPens are wasted every year just on EMS agencies. So an EpiPen right now, the average price is $322. The price of this kit is $50.
$5.05 is what I was told.
No, $50. He corrected it.
Did he?
For the demonstration project, I don't know what the cost will be finally, I guess.
Right, but
I think the final was $5.
because of the syringes being specially made and everything else, it was 50. It ended up being $50 a kit.
Does anybody know what's so special about the EpiPen patent? Is it the auto-injector itself?
And that patent, I think, runs out the end of this year.
All right.
They say, or something, year and a half.
Good.
Well, I think the price has gone up because there was a shortage of epi, and then it was a demand thing, and now they're well over $300.
And they're packaged where you have to buy two at once.
Yeah.
So that becomes
Yeah.
600, and for a small agency that may use one in a year.
So maybe they know their patent's running
And you
out.
can't just share them with a neighboring agency.
Yeah, we just paid $2,000 just to get restocked.
I know I received a phone call a week before last from the pharmacist, the chief pharmacist at NLH, and he said that he was very sorry to have to report that the hospital is no longer going to provide EpiPens because they can't afford to do so. His price is $250 a piece for them. And he said that any number of agencies have asked him to restock 4 each. And he said, that's $1,000 per agency. He said, we just can't do it. I said, well, you're under no mandate to do it, so, you know, apology accepted.
Do they actually expire? Does the drug actually expire?
Yes.
Now, I know it on the label it expires. Does the drug actually expire?
As long as it's clear, they say shoot it.
When it expires,
New protocol.
Sounds like a drug.
then it's expired, and then over the next 7 years, it loses another 10%. That's kind of the FDA standard, I think,
For epi or for all drugs?
for all drugs.
So you can keep it for 10 years.
So yeah, don't throw them out. So we're collecting them.
Well, some on the black market.
Next month, we'll plan to approve that entering the program? Next month, we'll plan to approve entering the program
For the summer break.
for summer break, because I
Are you looking for that now?
Let's go for it, because I'm
All right,
going to
so-
enroll all my squads right
All
away.
right, so Dr. Marquis, make a formal motion.
So we want to participate.
Go.
Formal motion of let's jump in and participate in this EPI program, pilot program.
Save money.
Is that what it's called? Is it called the epi pilot program?
I believe,
Demonstration project.
For BLS?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Any other discussion about this?
I would just have it just set up so that everyone has to go through like Phil or someone, so you don't have people just trying to blindly go in.
Yeah,
Because there's always a process for the demonstration project.
right.
And you'll have to have medical director's approval to join in anyway.
Correct, but I
With
mean, I would
acknowledgement.
funnel everyone up through Phil.
Sure, send me, just like we did in Narcan now.
Correct, because it will be a demonstration project,
Send a
it'll be
letter
the
request
same,
on your letterhead signed by your medical director and your chief operator.
the same as the CPAP project was. Yep.
So this is now the third demonstration project that we have been faced with as a region or as a state in the last year. Should we create a formal or a more defined application or application process to the REMAC or the region, that requires what the demonstration project is, why you want to be involved, medical director signature, requesting the approval for that particular agency, and then that comes to the region?
Has that been developed, actually?
It has not.
Has not been developed.
So, like I said, this is the third demonstration project that this region has participated in 12 months, with CPAP, the Narcan, and now this EPI demonstration project. I think every agency right now just basically writes a letter or asks for permission. Maybe we should create a standard application.
Up to now, it's been a letter on the agency letterhead signed by the operating officer, chief operating officer, and the medical director both. But, and it has not, because there aren't a huge number of requests, it has not become unwieldy, but I think a standardized piece of paper might be a good idea. Yeah, be a good idea.
I think Tom's got a good point in the sense that, certainly to apply to the Department of Health to do a demonstration project, you have to cross every T, dot every I. So the protocol, whatever they're proposing is...
Right, well, that process, the Department of Health application process has already essentially been done.
Okay.
All you're asking is to be a part of the larger project,
And-
whether it's a simple letter on letterhead or however, because it has to go through Phil. I mean, there is a clearly defined process for this in place.
Howard, does REMO have something along these lines of a standardized application form for them for
No.
approval? They don't?
I'm not aware of any of them, Phil, because all the standardized formatting is done with the initial step when you make application.
Okay.
Is there a one-page synopsis of the demonstration project?
I haven't seen one.
It's probably in the minutes somewhere from the CMAC. There'll be a synopsis of it, or the presentation.
Again, I have included in the State Council report the actual slideshow
That's
that
probably
Dr.
your
Daly
best.
had presented to the CMAC.
All right.
We can, Gus, we can put together some kind of a sample form and send it around to the docs and see what you think of it. How's that?
How about on the sample form, let's include CPAP, let's include Narcan, and let's include the epi.
Check-off,
So
yeah.
a checkoff, so we know what agencies are doing what.
Sure.
Well, the other demonstration projects are closed. There's only one open right now.
Well, but then that way we'll know, Phil will know that that is a Narcan agency, CPAP agency, and a.
Right.
So we'll
Dave,
keep track.
when an agency gets approved for any of those projects, I always tag that in the agency database that I have.
It would make it easier on you.
It'll be a lot easier for the standardized form, yeah. A lot easier. Sure.
Could I ask you a question regarding that? Do we have record now of how many people have been approved for the Narcan and how many people have, this is probably for Mary or Joe, how many agencies have applied for the controlled substance license?
I have a sheet on my desk that has, I can tell you by county who has them and who doesn't. But I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. Now, along those same lines, Bassett Hospital will probably, we have a test case going through to B&E. It'll go into B&E tomorrow. Once that one is approved, Bassett should allow other agencies to sign up for narcotics. So hopefully within 10 days or so, because next week is a holiday week. I don't know what B&E's schedule is. We should find out.
So, is it still going to be regional policy, Gus can answer this, that they have to sign up by the end of this month, or I guess it was the 15th of this month, wasn't it? Or they can't practice ALS, is that a regional policy yet?
Yeah, that got kicked down the road like a year at least, right?
Last October, that was squashed.
Yeah, well, it's in legal review, which means
Correct.
effectively limboed. So, but yeah, that requirement for ALS has been rescinded.
There is no requirement, however, they're working on making it part of regulation. So you can either do it now or do it later, is basically.
Yeah, it was unenforceable in its current form.
But it will be part of Part 800, it's
Eventually.
800.5, yeah.
Right.
All right, any other?
I just have a question, like as a caveat to that. If this gets initiated as a BLS protocol, are BLS providers, if it's a strictly BLS agency, are they going to be able to do that if they don't have an ALS provider to fall back on? If there's an adverse reaction to the medication they're giving, say they get a bad heroin overdose, so the BLS provider pushes the full dose of Narcan, now they have an extremely combative patient, they have nothing to really fall back on, they're not going to hit them with Haldol or anything else. They don't have that option. That's my concern as a provider.
Well, I think it doesn't change the, sort of the chief complaint, right? So ALS intercept guidelines are based on patient presentation, right? So in the epi case, right, so you have anaphylaxis, and BLS happens to have the epi and they're on scene. That doesn't obviate the need for ALS as well. Doesn't mean it's a BLS run all of a sudden because they're not
That's
using
all I'm
it.
considering. How is that going to change,
I
how
think
we
it
operate?
changed. I think that somewhere in our protocols, ALS intercept conditions are defined. So unresponsiveness would still be an ALS condition. In my mind, I don't see how they get around that.
And there's actually studies that show that when you give a good dose of Narcan and the patient wakes up, you just get out of their way because they're going to be fine. I have just an issue for discussion or for thought. Many of you know I come from a different region, so thank you for letting me come here to participate. One issue that's come up to me, and it seems like it's a very different practice in this region than it was in the previous region in which I worked, is the management of cardiac arrest in the field. I certainly don't have to tell you that the transport times are long in this area. To put a patient in cardiac arrest who doesn't have ROSC in an ambulance and transport them seems like a pretty inefficient use of services. and a big danger for the providers, and it gives a bill to a patient. I recently had a complaint of a family member who said, if my husband was dead when he got to the hospital, why did you send me a $2,000 bill? And I guess that really brings it up. Why do we transport patients who are not getting ROSC on the scene? The best way to, the most efficient way to run a cardiac arrest is to leave the patient where they are, right? With a few exceptions, obviously. But you do the best CPR if they're right where they, you stay right where you found them. You do all you have to do. And from the ALS perspective, you have everything to resuscitate that patient, with the exception of trauma, perhaps, that we would in the hospital. So why don't we secure codes in the field in this region on a regular basis? Is there history there, or have we just not thought about it?
Oh, I think we've thought about it. My response to that, and this is what I said to Deb before, is like, okay, so who's going to declare death? Based on what? So somebody has to pronounce this person dead. We have some obvious things like decapitation, we'll probably get, medical control.
We'll keep that one. The head's here, the body's there.
The don't initiate resuscitation cases like decapitation, injuries inconsistent with life, rigor mortis and dependent lividity. Those are, New York State policy. You don't have to initiate resuscitation. But all over the state are protocols that enable ALS providers to terminate resuscitation with medical control after appropriate ALS treatment has been done. And I think the AHA gives you very, very clear criteria of when it doesn't make sense to continue.
However, we have a situation, Deb, if I may interject, we have a situation in certain areas in this region, which I'm personally aware of, where the physician at the other end of the line will not terminate. He'll say, bring him in.
Yeah. Then,
that's our sticking point.
That is medical.
That's a sticking point.
And that's an education that we need to do on the physician side for sure.
Is there, so we've adopted the collaborative protocols, which are really ALS. Does it not speak to this?
It does, I think it does say, contact a provider for consideration of termination.
Yes,
but the practice here is, from what I've seen, is get them the ambulance right away. You can't do effective and safe CPR in an ambulance.
So we don't need a policy change, it sounds like. We just
Practice.
need education about that option.
And everybody has to be comfortable with it.
Right.
If you do the resuscitation on the scene and it's unsuccessful, and we provide appropriate training for our ALS providers on how to talk to family members, you leave the patient there, the coroner comes there, and that's it. So there's medical control, so there's your physician involvement, and then the coroner comes and takes the patient, and the death certificate gets done. However, the death certificate gets done, and it doesn't bring a dead patient into the emergency department, and the family dragged out a bill, and an ambulance flying down the road with a bunch of unsecured people in the back. But frankly, by the time you get them to me, there's nothing that I'm going to do, because it's 45 minutes down the road,
Deb, this has been kind of standard practice in the Remo region since the mid-90s. I became a medic in '93, and we were securing these in the field in '94.
Right, and the Heart Association pushed out through the ECC in 2010's rollout the same thing, and there was a strong emphasis on it.
Well, we do have a protocol on termination and resuscitation in the field, but
It involves quality medical control and getting the approval of the physician at the other end of the line. And if the physician says, no, I want to see the patient, we have
Then
no
you have to,
options.
you're right.
We have no
And there may
options.
be some extenuating circumstances. It's a baby. Their family members on the scene are getting violent and saying, you've got to do something. Okay. We don't want the EMS providers to be put in a position that's uncomfortable, unsafe, or whatever. Or the patient's in a public place, I don't know. There's lots of examples of exceptions, but most of the cardiac arrests that I've seen since I started working in this region were dead before they left the scene. And you knew that, and I knew that, so why did you drive down the road at whatever speed you did to get a dead patient to me?
I want to add to Deb, if I may, the inadequacy of appropriate, worthwhile compressions of the moving ambulance is already proven to be below minimums. Think of your own safety. unless you've got the mechanical device to do compressions, you should not be standing up, holding onto the Jesus bar, doing compressions and moving in. You just shouldn't. You should be secured in your seats within arm's reach of equipment and patient IV lines and airway, not standing up doing compressions.
This month's Annals actually just has an article, Annals of Emergency Medicine has an article that says that the mechanical devices are not in fact better than good manual CPR.
No, but they're better than your paramedic becoming a projectile
Yes,
through your
correct.
windshield when you slam
Correct.
on the brakes.
Well, I think there was a lot of confusion, not on these
That's
protocols,
right.
but the previous protocols, there was a lot of confusion when part of the protocol said, do not, it was advised not to do CPR in a moving ambulance, if you can help it.
Right.
Okay, so
So
were they
do
supposed to
it
do
on the
CPR,
scene.
put them in the ambulance and take them to the hospital when we get there, say, we couldn't do CPR because the ambulance was going down the road?
Right.
And a lot of BLS providers are not comfortable with some of these protocols right now.
Well, our region, we have a lot of potholes, which really
Helps with
it's
compression.
an augmentation, I think.
I think a lot of it goes back to agency and hospital education with the termination or resuscitation. Because I've had a physician tell me, hey, doc, I've been doing CPR for, we've done over 10 minutes, we've gone through our drugs. I can't make that call. I haven't seen the patient, I can't make
Well,
that call.
I would just,
That's education that we have to do.
I think know the
There's an
policy,
agency
right?
policy with
So just speak directly to the protocol and say, we've confirmed whatever. You have to give some evidence to the physician for them to feel
All
comfortable
there
that
was, it was 30 minutes.
you're following the protocol.
He just said, I can't make that call, and did you give bicarb yet? Yes, doc.
Yeah.
Sorry, doc, you're breaking up.
So it sounds like the policy, the protocol is enabling for this to happen. It just isn't happening as often as it might. That's what it sounds like.
I think that there's a training and education standard that should be addressed with this as well. Those of us that are from bigger agencies that do this repeatedly are more likely to secure somebody in the field and are confident in our skills, and we know that we've done everything. But there's a lot of smaller agencies out there that, providers may never see a cardiac arrest, or they may have only seen 1 or 2 cardiac arrests in their career. And I think that, you're seeing patients being transported by agencies that are not comfortable at their skill level, whereas...
That's not always true, because when every cardiac arrest that I've seen come in, I've said, what did you think I was going to do? Did you consider termination on the scene? And they were like, yeah, we don't usually do that here.
Yeah.
Did you get called though as medical
No.
control?
There's a lot of physicians that also don't know the providers. Nathan Latour goes through physicians constantly. I don't know who that physician is on that day. That's what
Is
I
it-
know.
so
I'm
is it
always
open-
meeting someone different. They don't know who I am, so they're not going to trust me.
Is there a suggestion that we turn this into an educational module to get out to agencies?
I think that education is huge, and the education should primarily focus on the responder being able to speak to the family. We've had situations that Deb spoke about where, why did you bring him to the hospital if he's dead? But we've also been on the other side of the fence.
What do you mean you're not?
Where, what do you mean you're going to leave him in our living room?
Yeah.
And then we have issues in our county with the coroner,
And
as
then
well.
that's when you get law enforcement to come and let law enforcement sit with the patient while the coroner comes.
And unfortunately, here's what happens in that situation is we end up transporting that body anyways, but now we're transporting it to the morgue as opposed to the ER. There is a lot, but I think that more importantly, providers have to feel comfortable in speaking with family members. That there is no education and there is no training in that aspect of it. So
Another
there has to be a
component,
comfort
yeah.
level.
So it sounds like it's hospitals, providers,
We may need
families.
to involve coroner's offices too, because the first time you call a coroner's office and say, come to, 630 East Main Street, and they go, what? There has to be some discussion with them to assure that they understand that they need to go do that.
Also, what is a reasonable amount of time to work a cardiac arrest?
AHA
on
clearly
scene?
defines it, yeah.
And that message needs to get out to the
I
agencies.
I think it's important for providers to don't think that the ED's being lazy. I just, you have the ability to do everything I do. There's nothing special that I have in the ED. You have it all, and it's safest for you and best for the patient to just use your skills on the scene. You are the expert. You do it well. Stay there and do it.
As
And
a
if you
side-
can't do it, I'm not going to do it.
As a side note, I'll say that for about a year now, about a year ago, training and education at GAVAC as well as our supervisory group met, and we said, Now is the time we need to start staying on scene and working these cardiac arrests, just like you're saying. The ER is not going to do anything different than we are going to do on scene. And we have seen some remarkable reversals by doing
Just
that
by doing
on
it
scene.
well there, yeah.
Right, by doing a good job on scene rather than scooping
And
and
then you
running.
put them in the ambulance.
Right, exactly right.
Regarding the coroner in the counties that I've provided care in, this is a crime scene until proven otherwise. So this is law enforcement that's going to come in, and I mean that's really where your dispatch center is going to activate law enforcement to come to the scene once you declare that, if they don't already respond, as they do in Albany County, to all EMS calls. And law enforcement is going to take care of the coroner part of that.
All right, we'll just go one by one, people.
To talk about the coroner group and like that, here in Fulton County, our coroner is a very progressive coroner's office, and matter of fact, they just revamped the office. And we as EMS providers are not even allowed to call the coroner. If we feel that we're going to terminate something in the field, we have to notify law enforcement. Law enforcement gets there, they talk to us as the provider, and then they in turn notify their investigators, and they notify the coroner. And like,
This is
like
after
you
it's
just
been
said,
terminated, right?
Yeah, it's considered a crime scene until she determines it otherwise. And we're actually working our codes on the scene, and when we get done with the code, we used to pick up all of our sharps and all that, and secure everything. Where now we're leaving the law enforcement in control of that body with our sharps sitting next to the body on the order of the coroner, because she says it's a crime scene and it's hers until then, and then she picks everything up now. And that changed shortly after the first of the year here, which she started in, and it was like, whoa, wait a minute, what are you talking about? We always secure our sharps. She says, no, not anymore. You're going to do it my way, and this is how it's going to be done. And I'll tell you, it's a very progressive way of looking. Even we just unhook all of our stuff. We shut the IV off. We take and disconnect the tube. We snap our leads off, and if they're on a backboard, the backboard stays. She picks the patient up with the backboard and everything else, and we get the backboard back clean even.
Wow.
Yeah, very strange way of working it, but I'll tell you, it's working out very good here in this county.
Somebody else had a comment?
As far as the education for the EMS side, in the 2005 version of PALS, there was a whole breakout optional section on death, dying, grief, and notification. I actually ended up teaching that several times, and we used that quite a lot down in the Hudson Valley region. So that's been developed into a program, but we can take that farther if the region wants to, and develop it into something that includes law enforcement, the EDs, and such, so we're more comfortable. And we were using that down in Poughkeepsie and that area. We did a lot of it, and the hospitals actually would pull medics off the rigs to work with the families.
Is there a small group that's willing to volunteer and help Joyce put this together for the regional?
Obviously.
Okay, it sounds like we have 3
The other
volunteers.
thought, Gus, is this something that maybe might be suggested to the collaborative protocols to expand upon?
Sure.
Because they're looking at the 2015 AAJ rollout to redo the protocols at that time. This would be a good time to tie this in.
Yeah, it sounds like it's less of an issue in their region, but fine.
I mean, they're collaborative. If it's an issue here, it's probably an issue in other rural areas,
Right.
just as much so.
Yeah. What you have that smaller agencies don't have is usually a chaplain's office or someone from the chaplain's office. And that kind of speaks to what everyone else has just identified as that lack of comfort with working with families, knowing what to say, et cetera. So one other perspective might be to see what's already available in the community in terms of chaplains, pastors, et cetera, who might want to work with EMS in an assistive way. And probably the larger agencies have something already within their agency for that could be shared.
Yeah, and the other thing is, Mary brings up a good point as far as protocols go. I know that that collaborative group has had conversation in a sort of a palliative care protocol in education piece in the protocols that are conversation has been kicked around that group on a couple of occasions.
Yeah, I think it's Dr. Bloom or something like that from Rochester, who's the physician behind the development of the MOLST form. Rochester has interest in maybe doing something in the area of basically palliative care pushed into the field. I haven't seen anything come out of that, but Dr. Kushner was discussing that.
They're, actually, if you go to their website, they do have programs. They also have a whole ton of supplies and stuff that you can do in-house training with.
Rochester region does?
No, it's actually off the MOLST, careandcompassion.org.
That addresses pre-hospital.
Yes, there's a whole pre-hospital section, and they're actually available all free of charge.
There's a lot of
They'll come and do
resources that we could.
trainers.
There's online training there also that'll kick out a CME certificate for providers also. We have all of our students go through.
So Howard, you volunteer
Email.
for this deal, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
All right, any other discussion for the REMAC? We have an executive session to do.
That's our executive session, sir.
Okay, so let's go. Where are we going, Phil? Next door?
Right next door. Right through the open door.